the director of Serralves. I say that for my colleagues in the room from time to time, they forget that I am actually the director. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight. It's a summer crowd. People online don't see, but the room is actually saturated with people. We had long line outside. It's a great gathering. It's an overdue gathering that has a little bit of a story on its own, and it works very well for an artist like Nalini Malani, who is in many ways a storyteller. Nalini is not to be reintroduced here. The exhibition has been on at Serralves for a few months now and will continue until the end of August. But it's my great pleasure to welcome to Serralves tonight Ana Mendes. Ana Mendes has hold a PhD in cultural study. And I'm not going to do the third person because you're next to me. So you are an associate professor at the Faculty of Art of the University of Lisbon. It's right? My notes are right? Okay. Your field of specialty are or is the analysis of representation of cultural otherness and their reception in the global cultural market. Does it make sense? I hope it does for me, which I think cover, among other, the field of post-colonial studies and migration studies. You have published extensively. Some of your book, one of our publications, are Reorientalism and South Asian Identity Politics, the edited collection of Salman Rushdie and Visual Culture, and the monograph Salman Rushdie and the Cultural Marketplace. Again, you have published a lot, among other, in Third Text magazine and the Journal of Commonwealth Literature. Actually, at some point, you and me, we will have to talk about Salman Rushdie and visual culture. Yes, I have a good story for you. Wow. Around an artist that you also, we talked about earlier, around Kara Walker. I have but that will be for later. Tonight, it's Nalini Malani. And the beauty of tonight, it's of this meeting between Anna and Nalini is that we actually didn't plan it. No. It was, you organized it with Nalini. Tell me if I'm right or if I am wrong, but you're so fascinated by the work of Nalini Malani that spontaneously you send an essay to Nalini that Nalini shared with us, and it was such a powerful insight in her work that Nalini really expressed the desire to have a conversation with you and us, after reading your work, actually to extend an invitation so that this meeting could be possible. Originally, we really hoped that this meeting could have been possible in person, and we really tried with Nalini since we opened the exhibition, but each time something happened. It's always the same thing, and the travel has not been possible. So we tried our best. It will be on screen, and I really look forward to hear your conversation, to hear you and Nalini talk and share with us your knowledge of Indian culture, Indian history, and cinema that your essay really outlined in a marvelous way. So I will disappear. Here I am just papel de parede, but I want to thank everybody who made this evening possible. You traveled to us. Nalini, who's on the other side, for her continued commitment to the exhibition. Philippe Loureiro, who has been working, our curator who worked directly on the show. Anna from La Caixa for making this exhibition possible. So now I'm going, and you are alone with Nalini. But I'm here. If something bad happens, the wallpaper is on the chair. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Philippe, for this very generous introduction. I was astonished with the homework that went into this presentation. Yes, I tend to write a bit too much, and that's what also happened with Nalini. Nalini in general, so I already had this idea that I first introduced to Mika Baal, and that is how we also came to know each other. But then knowing that Nalini was coming to Portugal, I really had to, tell her that, hello, I would love to meet you. And then we struck a conversation, and it turns out that we have a lot of things in common. So thank you, Serralves team, Philippe, Diana, and the team, the technical team. Sorry, Pedro and Bruno. Thank you. Sorry, Bruno, for making this possible. There is some resistance to traveling. I must acknowledge that also on my part. I traveled from the south here, which I had no resistance to traveling before, what happened in 2020. But I'm very happy to be here. And this is a funny story. I wrote the essay that Philippe was talking about without actually visiting the exhibit. And today I had the great pleasure of contacting with your works, Nalini, in the presence of the works, not through the digital media, through, the catalogs that you always send me. And I'm still processing and continue to write on what these works provoke in me. Of course, sorry, I'm talking too much at this point, but I just want to first, as a frame for this conversation and to, justify my presence here. And Philippe brought this up, how we actually met and started a conversation. And I think it's also interesting, at least from my perspective. I hope you also find that interesting. My first contact with Nalini's name was through Salman Rushdie, because I was doing a PhD on Rushdie. I was very interested in visual culture, and I was working on The Moor's Last Sigh, the novel, 1995 novel. And at some point, in a review of an exhibit at the Tate Modern by paintings by Amrita Sher-Gill, another Indian painter from the early 20th century. And Rushdie mentions Nalini in that review as one of the inspirations for crafting that character. And then I started following Nalini, and that is how I came to you, and I don't know how you came to me, but it was first. It was me. So hello, Nalini. Sorry, talking too much.
Hello. No, not at all. It's lovely to hear the background of your interest. And of course, Salman's book is something that does connect with me. And it's on the platform of Salman Rushdie that we can even proceed further.
Exactly.
Because we have, he and I both come from what I always call Bombay. And he's a year younger than I am, born in 1947, being Midnight's child, whereas I was born in 1946. But interestingly, he went to a school where I had a lot of very good friends, and his sister went to my school, so, which was a girls' school, and but she's of course much younger than I am. So the Moor's Last Sigh, I did a BBC talk on that book, and for me that was very special because it had a lot of my friends in it, people like Bhupen Kakkar and
Exactly.
Geeta Kapoor and Vivan Sundaram. So, and for me, what was very important is what Salman does to language. He, as all of us have felt, people like us in India who have taken English as our thought language. It's not my mother tongue, but it's a language that we have interiorized for ourselves. And I think the English we speak is not the English of the English anymore. I think it's a kind of a, I don't even like the word vernacular, but let's say, just like in Spanish, Spanish is spoken so widely in most of Latin America, and it has its own intonation. Similarly with English, the way Salman writes about in English is those intonations are very Indian. So for me, that was a very interesting aspect of his work, and which in fact gave me a kind of a portal into indigenous ways of working. So that's where a writer's work can be so inspirational in the visual world as well.
So, I think you are also talking about issues of hybridity, right? Hybridity in language, hybridity in influence, and you were talking about school and going to school. And I would like to go back to your initial training at the Sir J.J. School of Art in Bombay. I know you don't want me to say Mumbai, or at least you do not agree with change of name. But I was thinking of in terms of aesthetic genealogies, and what I find very interesting in your work, and which I also find interesting in Rushdie, is precisely this hybridity with tension, with the tension between the indigenous, as you mentioned, the Indian side, and also the Western references. And we also know that because of this hybridity and this cosmopolitanism, sometimes you are also accused, I mean cosmopolitan artists, of catering to the West. And this was one of the arguments of the co-edited book, Reorientalism. So that is something. How did you manage this tension? I'm thinking in terms of the Bengal School of Art and the progressives. We talked about this, but I'm very interested in, because you have all these important legacies in terms of modernism and references, influences taken from the West, or rather sticking to the Indian representation. how do you manage this? And on top of this, being a woman in the 60s. So how?
That's a lot that you
Yeah,
ask
but
in that one question.
it's becoming an artist and a female artist in a very orthodox way, because
Scenario,
post-independence you had already these progressives trying to do away with the Bengal School of Art, that kind of nationalist way of looking or representing, but on top of it, a woman.
Yeah, so this is entire, today when I, at this age and after so many years of working in the arts, whatever happened in India before is part of my lexicon. I do separate out various trends. For example, for me, Kali Ghat is the moment of modernism because it's no more to do with religion, and it harps more on the local stories, all the things that were happening around the artists at that time near the Kali Ghat temple. For example, the gossip about the woman who had fallen in love with the priest, and then the husband comes back and cuts her head off, and then there's a court case, which actually happened. It was a court case that was run by the British, because it was still British India at that time. But the artists at that time had lost their patronage. That is to say that the royalty had got diminished because of colonization. And so they were sitting around the temple and making these quick watercolors that again changed the materiality of the work as well. So all of these things where Kali Ghat is concerned, for me became the pivotal point of modernism. Now, what happened when I was at JJ School of Art, in some sense, Bombay sort of there was a rivalry with the Bengal school. And we were even not encouraged to even look at the Bengal school artists. But it was later that when I started to examine the progressive artists, Akbar Padamsee and Tayyab Mehta, you do find linkages. And it's all very well to say that this is one aspect of Indian art in the contemporary arena, and that's another. But I think that artists like to think that they are gods in themselves, which is not a good thing at all. And that's what happened to the boys' club called the Progressive Artists.
Yeah.
But as a woman artist, it was a very tough period. People don't take a woman artist very seriously till you really hit the auction houses, and which was one thing that I shunned completely. So I think that now in India, at least, we have, for want of a better word, real masters amongst women artists. People like Arpita Singh, Nilima Sheikh, Madhavi Parekh, these are artists of my age. And I think that the younger artists have really come into their own. And I think that has a lot to do with the rest of the world being interested in what was happening in South India, South Asia, which includes as well Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Nepal, because there's a lot happening and there's excellent work coming out of Pakistan.
Thank you, Nalini. So we have a plan, right, of going through chronologically the works that you have here in the exhibit. So maybe we started by talking about your period in, I was talking about the JJ School of Art because I know you went to school with these artists that we associate to the progressives, although we had a conversation that you're not completely in line with their artistic manifesto, and that is something that is interesting. So moving on to the Vision Exchange workshop, that is very interesting also for me, because after that, you went to Paris with a
Yes.
scholarship. But what is more interesting for me is that you came back on a mission, right? You came back on a mission, and I think to participate, to contribute to the country's modernization, if we can call it that. And this is precisely what I find very present in these works, this two-channel film installation that you have here that reflects that period. And I'm interested in knowing why you juxtaposed and why did you choose this topic?
Well, the film on the right, the animation called, I made that in 1969 before I went to Paris. And at that time, I'd met the architect Charles Correa. He was a brilliant architect, and he had been given the commission to make a large township in what was going to be New Bombay. And it, 1969, we were a very, very young country. So there was a great deal of idealism and what we were going to do. And so at this time, he talked about his project as a space that he would make for the working class. This was meant as a working class housing. And he said, I have to have land for each of the workers, because they have actually come from the rural areas. They used to be farmhands, or they owned a plot of little land where they were always farming. So they should feel close to the earth. So this was a beautiful plan that he made, and it was sort of giving a chance to the community that would build the cities to actually progress themselves. So this idealism really fired me up, and I made a township of my own, like a maquette of this maquette, and I
So
also wanted to
that's
learn
the dream houses. Sorry, that's the dream
That's
house
the dream houses.
in
Yes.
your head.
Yes, in my head. And then when I came back and things were really not going so well, and already a kind of a decadence had set in the idealism that I was looking forward to. And then I made the film with this young girl who agreed to work with me. And she's looking out, on the one hand, at a slum colony, and also at new buildings that are coming up.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of beginning of a dystopia.
Yes, and it's interesting, and we have a video clip from that you were precisely mentioning, looking out, her gaze, and interesting because, and this also ties in with something I would like to ask you that has to do with the title of this exhibit, but we can go back to this retrospective that you have here, and the use of the punctuation, the interrogation point. Now, that's something that you will have to explain us. And also because in Can You Hear Me, which is your masterpiece, the closing off of all this brilliant exhibit that you have here, you have the word dystopia there also projected. And I think it's a corollary to everything that has been going on through your career. Let me show the clip. it's interesting, the utopian sentiment, but still you mentioned that already in the 70s there was some disillusionment already going on. Because for me when I saw this, it reminded me of my last trip to India, when I went through what I thought was the countryside and all these millennial cities coming to life, so many high rises, and it continues to tie in with contemporary preoccupations of urban renewal in India, of course, of which you know much better than I, but I was, because of all this Nehruvian modernity, idealism, it reminded me also, and I had to take a note of this urban modernization scheme that had the name of Nehru, that was inaugurated by the Prime Minister Singh in 2005, and it went on until 2014, and it was called the Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, that was targeted also to more working class residents, but also you have at the same time all these luxury apartments, the expulsion of lower income residents to make way for high rises, and that is why I wanted to bring this to our conversation. You know, Aravinda Diga has been is a hot commodity here, and we have, and it's on Netflix also, White Tiger, and it gave us this image of a darker India, not the shining India, and this is the India of the last man, Mumbai, the last man in Tower, that is a retired school teacher, that is the last man in a decaying tower of apartment blocks. And you can see there the deadline looming for the demolition of that old tower block to make room for the luxury apartments. So I think your work has this resonance, and that is something that I was always underscoring when I was writing about the exhibit without even seeing it, is this resonance. It continues to resonate. It continues to have this affect, emotional impact, because it's still very timely and resonant. Would you like to tell us a bit more on how you see this?
You know, I was very, very intrigued by your interest in this writer. What I found, I haven't read Last Man in Tower, but I know what it's about. Mm-hmm. It's a situation that is often found in old buildings, mm-hmm. which are just 3 or 4 stories, or sometimes up. This one is 6 stories, and they have become decrepit. And there is this, how shall I say, seduction by builders to have everyone sign a kind of a certificate saying that we agree to having our building demolished in the conditions that we are given apartments in the new building or another space somewhere else that we may choose. And Last Man in Tower, I actually know someone who did this, refused to move. It almost is a kind of way of giving a real elbow in the stomach to the bourgeoisie, the builder. And you know, he thinks he can do everything he with money and buy away and seduce these people who are living in the building for years and years and decades. But there is this person who is resilient to it and will not budge because his history is in that building. His you know, things have happened there. People have been born there, have died there, and he just refuses. And he's not interested in money. And that's almost, for the builder, it seems he's aghast that how this man refuses. And I think that some of the tenants also are quite surprised that there's actually someone who doesn't get seduced by dangling a carrot of gold. So it's extremely interesting. And the White Tiger has that sensibility too, where finally it's a working class person who has found a way to out-cheat the so-called, bourgeoisie in this case. So yeah, I find it a very interesting genre because, and in a way, it's in my own work, I don't want to be over ponderous, nor do I want to actually show a dystopic scenario, because I do want us to come out of it. I have some way to create a scenario where I want to seduce and have the visitor enter, and then I want to unravel my story, which might be together we make something which can give us some hope for the future. And my big concern nowadays is, now that I'm 75, is that we really have to keep thinking about the future generations, so.
Yes, because
yeah.
in the novel, the Master G, the protagonist, dies. He is killed.
Right. Okay.
So you are, yeah, sorry, spoiler.
No, I haven't read the book. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Spoiler, but in fact, also trying to find some regeneration in all the bad things that are around us, and we need some optimism and also think of future generations. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I also look at it as a metaphor for not wanting to erase history.
Exactly.
It's, for me, I've just read the synopsis of the book, and I felt, well, it falls in so much with the idea of, it's criminal to erase history. And so if I refuse to say Mumbai for Bombay, Bombay the name has a history. It belonged to the Portuguese, and it was given as a dowry in the marriage of Catherine of Braganza to the Prince of Wales. And all of it is encapsulated in that one name, Bombay, Good Bay. That's what it was, a good bay.
But the change of name also has to do with this continuous thinking of the idea of India, right? And now it seems that in New India, this India of redevelopment, the millennial city, I'm thinking of Gurgaon, for example.
Yeah.
Now it's Gurugram, something like that. So it's, in a way, looking only towards the future, which is strange because also now speaking of Gurgaon, we are talking about a satellite city of Delhi. The idea to go back to this Gurugram name is to go supposedly to an ancient name. So it's these narratives all are very contradictory.
Well, on the one hand, since the 90s, there was the move towards globalization. And what we understood as globalization is that, trade would be freer, there would be more exchange between countries. But it seemed as if that exchange only was taking place in the area of consumerism and exchange of goods and that kind of trade on one level, but not so much trade in terms of culture. And I think that more and more kind of an anxiety set in, at least in my part of the world, where there was a need to go back to a kind of a kind of a nativism, you know, a kind of
dangerous.
yes, dangerous nativism, and going back to so-called roots, and therefore the need to find roots again became a reason for erasing history. The fact that people that in 2500 BC, the era before Christ, people came down from the steppes through Central Europe into India, and these were Aryans. But the current dispensation wants to believe that Aryans were indigenous to India, and they want to prove that the seal of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa from the Indus Valley civilization is the image on the seal is that of a horse, but actually it's a unicorn. And historians have been at loggerheads saying that, you know, you have to be empirical about these things. And if there are areas, I mean, the script is still unknown, and people have been breaking their heads to figure out the script. So that kind of ersatz history has set in, and I think this becomes problematic. So names are getting changed, and of course there's every oligarchy, let's say, which is a move towards fascism, is trying to change names and also create the other. The other, creating the other is part and parcel of fascist, yeah. We know this from some recent history. It was only a century ago that Hitler rose in power, and that also through a democratic vote. And that's the frightening thing. The frightening thing is, where is democracy going, and is it so slender and so fragile, and what should we do to bolster it? And we see in Brazil, in the United States, almost on the edge, and Egypt and Turkey. So this is a real fear. You and Europe have already been through that whole period, and in Spain and in Portugal as well. But and there are people living till today who have lived that period and know how grotesque, how terribly grotesque and impoverishing it can be.
So speaking of genocide, and let me take you to unity and diversity and to the Gujarat pogrom. And because this was in 2002, and unfortunately it's still very much present because of Modi to begin with. And it resonates a lot with what you are talking about, because this is an extremely powerful artwork, and the audience here and at home will realize why that is, also because of the soundscape. And now we are moving on to, I would like also for us to discuss this issue of the soundscapes and how you choose the soundscapes. Also fascinating is your use of erasure, because what you have here is also an erasure of a very well-known artwork, The Galaxy of Musicians, that corresponds to a particular idea of India, of this unity and diversity. We continue with the Nehruvian thread, because he coined this motto in his 1946 book, on precisely unity and diversity, and what this artwork, your artwork, is doing is placing under erasure, a bit like sur rature, and this takes us to Heidegger and to Derrida and to literary theory, but that's what you do. And I would like if you could talk to us about this technique. So I'm fascinated with this. In fact, this was the artwork that most fascinated me at the beginning. I must say that today what I'm most fascinated with is, can you hear me? Because I was in the immersion in the room, but this for me struck a chord because of Modi and all the links that we can make to gendered violence, and also you have in the background these photos of Nehru and Gandhi, and the replication of what could be a middle-class living room. Let me show some images first, so you can already see Varma's Galaxy of Musicians in the background, with Nalini's superimposing of images. See. Even you startled.
Startled.
I am writing this letter on my deathbed. I am writing in my own name and in the name of the liberals who have been hanged in the capital. I am herewith informing you that we have to give back the task with which the coalition asked your person to entrust us, since we were unable to fulfill it. Maybe others will do better. You won't hear from Motabhai anymore. He's fine. It seems that traitors have a good time when people walk in blood. That is the way the world is designed, and it is not good. Excuse my handwriting. They've amputated one of my legs, and I'm writing in fever. I hope this letter will find you in good health, and I remain with greetings from the front lines.
I am the angel of despair. With my hands I dispense ecstasy, numbness, oblivion, the lust and the torment of bodies. My language is silence, my song the scream. Terror dwells in the shadow of my wings.
So Nalini, even you were startled.
Yeah.
So
I
why
remember
is
when
that?
I have to set up.
So
Because
I clicked a bit more than I should and didn't warn you and the audience here. But it's interesting that even you and we were prepping this, and each time we heard the shots, it startled us.
Yeah.
And we know that this is, of course, and you are very picky, for the lack of a better word, on the intensity of the gunshot. So
That's right, yes.
yeah, talk
So it's
to
meant
us
to
a
give
bit
you
more.
a moment of frisson. Yes, the texts are from Heiner Müller's The Mission. And the voice, the male voice, tries to emulate Nehru's voice. Well, the whole thing was, when I thought about making this work, it was, in a sense of a deep depression, because when I came back from Paris, it was that hope that this would be a country And I was very proud that we had so many different kinds of people living here, a real cosmopolitan mixture of people. And it was a country that was always open to migrants from other parts. There was no distinguishing one religion or the other. And therefore, an extremely rich culture had come about, and that would continue. So many years later, when one finds a new kind of party has emerged, whose ideology has nativistic ideas and how shall I say, the need to create the other through the minorities that we have, then I'm extremely worried. And the work, starting from a visual like the Galaxy of Musicians, which gave that idealism of India a kind of a visuality, let's say, with these women with different costumes. Each of the costumes really show where that person is from, and even gives an idea of what religion she might be following. And that was unity and diversity. And actually this painting was shown at a conference of religions in Chicago, and it was spoken about by Swami Vivekananda when he said that extremism in religion can lead to real problems. And I don't have the real quote, but you can see it on the screen over there. So all of this was extremely worrying, and this led me to make the work. A lot of people said, you'll have trouble. And even now, there is, now more than ever, I may not ever be able to show this in a public space, because, you know, the Hindutva ideology has come to stay. And that's the other worrying thing, that 2002 Gujarat has led to, in 2014, has led to vigilante groups being formed. And it's almost like a small army that is inveigles its way into areas where lynching becomes the norm, you know. So that, as you probably have heard, that beef is banned. And so if a Muslim is carrying meat, he's often accused of carrying beef. And before it's even proven anything, he's lynched. And even if you are a dairy farmer and have bought cows from a farmer's market and are taking it back to your farm, it's often, he could be accused on the road that he's going to slaughter that cow. So this is now inveigled into the system, into society. And that's very difficult. Even if things change, it will take a long time to cleanse this part of society. There will be need for a lot of thinking and working through where we can actually change this part. So this is really what is more worrying than anything else.
So it's always this tension between, in a way, there's this utopian idea that you, of course, this utopia that you wish to follow optimistically, in a way what Laurent Berland calls a cruel optimism, in a way, like thinking that things will, will turn out great. Yes. Think of the pandemic. And this dystopia that is closer than we think. And Hindutva and India as a Hindu nation is becoming closer and closer. You know, this idea that India is a Hindu nation is becoming more prevalent, despite all the protests that I remember when Modi was elected. People tried to reason, like think of the Gujarat riots. And in a way, like we had with Donald Trump, the memory is limited or selective. And it's in a way, Nalini, it's worrying that your works are so timely, unfortunately.
Well, I just want to say that Hinduism is not Hindutva. Hindutva is a new thing. It's something else. I wouldn't even compare it to Protestantism. It's a totally different design. Because Hinduism itself is a very free-floating way of life, let's say, not necessarily a religion with so many gods and so many goddesses, and so many different ways of interpreting the epics. It's not a stratified or organized religion like Christianity is, or Islam is, or Judaism. It's much more freewheeling, and you have images in Indian miniatures and also in the epics and the Bhagavad Puran, for example, where you have the gods are terribly naughty. They're consorting with their consorts in the heavens, and they're also cheating on their wives, and all of this is happening. You see it even in the pictures, in the miniatures, and the sculptures. So, and eroticism and spirituality go hand in hand. Hindutva shuns all that. You don't see that. In fact, you hardly see women. And in fact, if there is a woman, she's just a token character in the entire pantheon of ministers even. And of course, you know that there's a kind of epidemic of rape, and the rape is of very, very young girls, 8-year-old and even, preteen. It's a whole different idea of what is a woman. So woman is also the other. So, for example, there's always that thing that if a girl is raped, the question's asked her, what was she wearing? Why was she out at that time of night? What does she do? And, if she's so-and-so age, why isn't she already married? So there are so many things which are, difficult to deal with.
So I haven't shown yet Varma's work, so here it is. Yeah. Ideally, you would have like representatives from the newly formed, no, not newly formed, but to be. Then it was used post-independence because of that, because it corresponded to this idea of diversity. Of course, you are it's this customary move of using the woman also to represent this diversity, but of course this corresponded to this utopia of unity and diversity, and your erasure of this brings us other issues that have to do with the search for purity and not diversity. This strict notion of what Indian identity should be.
Yeah. Purity within quotes.
Of course, purity when purity in the bad sense. In ethnic, racial, religious. And no mixing, no hybridity whatsoever. And it's interesting because you mentioned that Hinduism is fluidity, and this contrasts with this idea of purity, of strictness. So I also found more clearly your feminist views. Here, your concern with gendered violence and resistance, especially in all the works. It was a common, that I came to this realization today more than ever, and this brings us to the next artwork. I will not be talking about all the artworks that you have in the exhibit, but this is extremely powerful. The other one also said that it was powerful, but this is very powerful also. And here you have the use of myth as a link language, because you have Electra, you have Cassandra, you have all this layering of references also, which for me again is what drew me to your artwork, this layering. Let me show you a bit more. And also you start off, and I'll show a video of a part of the video that is on display here. You start off with a map. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your starting with the map?
Well, this was a map that I found in Kochi in Kerala. And I was invited to be part of the Kochi Biennial, the first Kochi Biennial in 2012. And I decided to make a single channel work out of the 6 channels that I had for the video shadow play. And I saw this map in one of the rooms, which was a conference room of a business company. And the map had the United States in the center. Mm-hmm. Which is very unusual. Normally you would have Greenwich, or if it was the Chinese map, they always have China in the center. And on this, I projected on this. So that was my screen. Now, what has happened, even as late as 2012, we were still feeling the impact of the 2008 downturn of the economy because of the banking systems and all of that was happening in the Western world. But nothing impacts in one part of the world that doesn't impact on other parts of the world. I think even till today, we are suffering from that particular trauma of 2008. So I decided to incorporate the map into the work if I had to show it elsewhere. So America is the center, and actually you see every part of the problems that we have today have so much to do with the United States. I mean, the Middle Eastern crisis for one. The fact that now the US is moving out of Afghanistan is leading to other problems, huge problems for women especially. So, and then you see, for me, the character Cassandra, for me, signified all that I had been wanting to say about the problems of not interiorizing female instinct. Because Cassandra had the gift of prophecy. She could hear the future, but nobody believed her. Similarly, I think that female thought is like Cassandra's prognostications of the future. And so this work really has a lot to do with Cassandra's gift and not gift. That is, it was a gift and yet Apollo cursed her. So she does know the future, but the fact is that nobody believes her. And that was the whole problem of the real Cassandra and the Trojan horse, which later led to the downfall of Troy. And I think that we are all sitting on edge now to see what's going to happen, because there are many Trojan horses that we have incorporated into our systems. And it has led to a lot of tragedies, because it's just a world that has become so cruelly capitalist. And I say it's like they're global parasites, which are eating up the world. And it's in the extreme sense, it's toxic masculinity, which is literally cutting down all the forests and changing the whole nature of our planet. So all of that has to do with Cassandra's instincts. And I think that is really female thought.
But you mentioned, we were talking about Electra and this combination of Cassandra, Electra, and Ophelia in a way, but also from Devi's Draupadi. which is an interesting addition to this, to these references. So you're using Spivaks, and this is another way to enter Spivak into the conversation.
Yes.
It's interesting, the combination of these myths with Draupadi. I don't know if you want to talk.
Well, Draupadi, as Gayatri has translated Mahashweta Devi, it's a bit of a play on the name Draupadi, because the story that Gayatri has translated is about a tribal woman, an Adivasi, whose name is Draupadi, but in the colloquial language she becomes Dopadi. And in the story of Draupadi herself, she's lost in a game of dice, and the person who wins her keeps taking her sari off, and she calls out to Krishna, and Krishna helps her, and the sari is unending. Whereas in the tribal story, Draupadi herself, stands up and takes off that one clothing she has, which is just shorter than a sari. It's just about 3 meters, not even the 5 meters. And she tells the officer that, here I am, and he is very frightened to see this female figure naked walking towards him, dripping with blood because she has been raped. So is the kind of a contrast to the real Draupadi, whose Krishna did come to save Draupadi, but Draupadi herself stands up and she has a sense of agency, and she says, you want me? Here I am, So that is the play on the name Draupadi. But that's very interesting, the way this is put forward in the story of Mahashweta Devi, who was herself extremely close to tribal communities and wrote a lot about them. So what I very strongly feel that even if I speak about female thought doesn't belong only to women. I think it's also something that can be found in men who are conscious about how the world is going, and there are enough writers and philosophers and intellectuals who are very open to the idea.
And again, it's fascinating, this tension between, you put the spotlight on gendered violence, but also gendered resistance. And this is very present here. Going back to your reference to the US, to a US-centric geopolitical map, and to the 2008 crisis. It's interesting, and I saw this firsthand, your use of newspapers, the pages from newspapers, from financial newspapers. Already, from the pictures, I was already intrigued, and today I witnessed in the exhibition room, when people entered, they started reading the headlines. So it's not wallpaper, not just it's significant wallpaper, and it's interesting, very much interesting. I don't know if you would like to expand a bit on that.
Yes, well, this is what globalization finally has done. I mean, it's created markets. So-called markets where you can if you could live a whole life within these markets and watch the graphs go up and down, and you could play these markets. So it's like you have to understand where this money is coming from, and whose sweat of the brow does this money come from. It's money makes money is what people say. But that money makes money out of what? Somebody's labor. Now, it's not out of nothing. It's somebody has labored, and you have harvested that from that person. So I think that there are many things that I think younger generations need to understand when they get lured by markets. And I think that these are things that really have to do with how economies can really help. Because as long as there's extreme poverty in the world, we're never going to progress. This real progress is never going to happen, because real progress is thinking of the other. Real progress is really seeing to it that there is the poverty and education are two factors which really need to be looked at very seriously in all parts of the world, including the United States, because there is poverty there, and 2008 made people really poor. I mean, it was for certain families, it was a disaster. So I think that economics, it's not something that you always say, I'm not political, I don't understand economics. You have to. You have to. In today's world, as a citizen of the world, even if it's very rudimentary, you really have to understand what exactly is happening. I am not either of these. I'm not an economist, nor do I have a political bent of mind. I'm not a political scientist, but it affects me. It affects me because it affects people around me and people who I'm in contact with, and I see what impoverishment and lack of education is doing to people. I mean, it's we have to think about how we have to move forward. You can have a telephone in your pocket and you can have all these gadgets, but technology and the human psychology have to move in tandem.
Mm-hmm. And even you were talking about the cell phones, and parts of that cell phone come from extractivism and exploiting, resources.
Exactly, yeah.
So human and material. So we need to be aware of that. So you have what we would call in today's terms like a social justice agenda also. But you have also always had this agenda, if you don't feel, if you're not offended with the use of agenda. Let me just go through some slides from this artwork in particular. And I included this, maybe it should have come earlier when we were talking about in Utopia, and this is, in a way, relates to my thought process of how your artworks make links in my head to things I have read. For example, Arundhati Roy, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, and precisely the killings of Muslims, and how the killings went on for weeks and the police would not register. So it was, they were completely invisible, precarious and invisible. So in your work is very much to give visibility, but also to give a voice. And this takes us to the final work, but before that, let me show a quote that is in one of the reproduced in one of the walls, also in the exhibit. And Nalini has mentioned about this female thought process, and she already mentioned that it's not exclusive to females. We don't want to talk about allies because it has become a dirty word also, allies, but it's not exclusive to females, but it's a thought that is geared towards progress. Here is another image from the exhibit. And here's the video clip.
This is Cassandra speaking.
In the heart of darkness, under the sun of torture, to the capitals of the world, in the name of the victims.
I eject all the sperm I have received. I turn the milk of my breasts into poison. I take back the world I gave birth to. I bury it in my womb.
Down with the happiness of submission. Long live hate, rebellion and death.
So let's move on to the masterpiece, one of the masterpieces and the final work in the exhibit, Can You Hear Me? Which is, it blew me away, I must say, entering the room, but also there's this, there's your work, but there's also the curator's work here at or your work with the curator, because we were talking about that in the morning, and it seemed that Can You Hear Me was made for Serralves, because it fits into the room. It belongs to that room, because you enter the room and there's so much going on. You're completely immersed in your head, or at least your head at that moment, or in various moments, because you all have here so many illusions that I was not even aware of, like Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, Milan Kundera. Another thing like A Tale of Two Cities that I would like you to talk about that. So there's so much here that we should let the artist speak of what was going on in your head.
I was popping out these animations on my iPad. I found a very simple app, and I was drawing with my fingers, and also making the sound pieces. I don't call it a sound design. It was really composing little things on GarageBand. So it was all on this iPad. And I was so angry about things. I said, I can't go on the streets and start shouting, but I can put this out. And my daughter said, why is this ideal for Instagram? I said, I don't know how to use it. And she taught me, younger generation. And so I said, yeah, okay. So she said, as long as it's less than a minute, you can put it on Instagram. So I did, and I learned how to do it. But after a bit, I said, a friend said to me, why don't you project it and see how it holds? Because if it's a good codex, then you can actually project it. So I said, well, there's a whole lot of them. And so I said, what I've made are notebooks. There are like notes in a notebook, jotting down things. They're like thought bubbles. And I'll not project them straight like rectangles, but like an accordion book. When you open an accordion book, and then if I have to project it, then I will make it like an accordion book that you walk into.
Exactly.
So each of these animations is like a page out of a notebook. And that's how the idea of installing it grew. And when I did project them to check out how well it stayed, I mean, the pixel stayed quite steady. And even though it was only on my iPad, then it seemed to work. And actually at the Whitechapel, where it's showing as well, in the library, in the old library, where the walls are made of brick. And I wanted to leave the bricks because there also is a history of almost a century and a half ago, because that library was a free library built by a philanthropist who had the library open to the migrant communities who would come and live in the East End. And the first migrants who came were victims of pogroms in Poland. And so people were allowed to use this library. So it was open till quite late in the evenings. And now there are waves of other migrants. And at the moment, it's become a Bangladeshi community that lives there. So for all of that, I said, I don't want to clad the bricks. And we projected directly on bricks. Again, it was a test to see how the images would work. And they worked like moving graffiti. So people have said, you know, we feel we are in an alleyway with graffiti, but it begins to move. So I was very pleased about that. I think it, the kind of, because, you know, because of the COVID, we've been installing online. Even Porto was installed online. We had seen the space, of course, had physically come. That also helped. But the actual install took place on Zoom and Skype. So the idea that you walk in and it completely surrounds you, and in a sense, you're also bombarded by the sound, by the words. So just like in a notebook, you have annotations and notes and quotes from other writers. I love the writing of so many of these people that I quote. I think they have such a great gift. So it's also to give them a platform to, you know, to voice those wonderful ways of speaking.
In a way, you're extending the words. Through this animation medium, you're extending the words. And maybe I'll show the video so that those of you who are watching here and at home can see. Of course, this is just one.
No, it's not the room, it's just a single one.
It's just a single one, yes. So you really need to be there. Sorry for superimposing my voice, but this is just one, and there are 8 others.
There are 88. 88.
This is fascinating.
I think that's it.
Okay, yeah. I was
Yeah.
looking.
So there were 88 animations and all.
Exactly, and the sound design is absolutely amazing, and it's really, really immersive, and it's a grand finale for the path through your exhibit, and I feel there was so much more that we could talk about, and I had gazillion notes of things I would like to
Well,
discuss.
there's one thing that you have pointed out, which now has set me thinking that what I started with from '69 onwards, when I finished at the School of Art, till today, I've just been pretty single-minded in
Exactly.
terms of. I might use all sorts of medium, but it's still, yeah.
Yeah, single-minded, but with the tension, reflecting the tension, the oscillation, getting the pulse of this tension. That is the unfolding of history, and
Right.
yeah, that's what I found brilliant. Thank you so much,
Well,
Nalini,
thank
for
you very much. I mean, it has been a very, very enriching time reading your work and talking to you, because the best thing about being with a theorist like yourself is that, I get so much. I discover things about my own work through your words,
thank you
which is
again.
absolutely so constructive and so creative that this is the ideal for me.
Thank you so much, Nalini, for your words, for your generosity, for your work, and for giving us this wonderful event again. And I look forward to meeting you in person again.
Yes.
And thank you on behalf of everyone here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I thank you so much as well. Both of you. It was so fascinating. I think we all learned so much. For me, there's only a few words. There's no thing to add, but the word relevant keeps coming back. I think it's one of the most complicated challenge for a museum of contemporary art. The art of our time is to remain relevant, and your work and your words are really contributing to keep us here relevant. And there is this sentence, Nalini, that you say that I think could be applied to so many walk of life, situations and institutions. Real progress is thinking of the other. Whether you run a museum, a library, a non-for-profit of another kind, a financial company, thinking of the other at this moment of time in our history, I think if what we learn from art, from your work, and understand what it means, and I think that's also why showing your work is so important. If we understand what it means and the responsibilities that it implies, I think we are making a little bit of progress. So thank you so much for this evening, for the work, and for everybody who has not seen the show yet, please. You have to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.